33 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Hope you guys, everybody out there, had a great July 4th weekend and back in the swing of things again with such a high honor and such a kind of a transcendent interview the other day with my guest. I had to have him back for set 2. Julian Priester, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, thanks, Jake. Good to be back.
I talked to Stanley Cowell about a year ago, and he told a story about going over with, I think it was Sam Rivers and Max Roach to West Africa, and with an attempt to really try to talk with leaders there about the brainwashing that has and still continues to go on as it relates to the African people, and the kinds of artistic and spiritual movements that they could do to help build that bridge between America and the motherland. And I just wanted you to talk about if you did similar trips along the first time you went to the motherland, and ultimately what your experience was and how you've tried to advocate for your people through your music.
Yes. Well, I did not go to the motherland. I've never been there.
Wow.
One of the things that's still on my list of things to do. But working with Max, I was in an environment, with people who were much more aware of the shift and the disparities and the struggle. I'm sure Max was very involved, as Mingus was, and many other giants of jazz were really working hard to try and smooth out the struggle that they were having with the music industry. In a way, how can I put it? We still were under the yoke. We still were, in a sense, slaves. Although we were getting compensation for it, but still we had no control. And Max and Mingus were really fighting very hard to gain more control over their lives, their livelihoods, the ownership of their art, the compensation for the art, and on down the line, all the things that come into play in this world of commercial world, I should say, capitalist world.
Yes.
And it's still a struggle. We can go into that.
No, I want to. This is very important for my generation and for younger generations. Rahsaan Roland Kirk did an album called "Volunteered Slavery." You just alluded to slavery. Now, can you explain what Max and it seems so obvious that just through the essence of the music that they were playing, in and of itself, that was advocacy for their own people. But can you explain from a standpoint of under the yoke, as you say, how you were still slaves? You were definitely getting compensated for making it, but I want you to broaden it out, because people think of slavery and we go back to the spirituals and the sharecropping and slaves running away to the Native Americans, and the Native Americans then taking them in. So just branch out. How did slavery become, like Rahsaan was saying, volunteered slavery? If you could flesh that out.
Well, here it is in a nutshell. We're compensated just enough to get it's just enough to keep us coming back. It's never enough so we can get ahead. It's just enough to keep us hungry, keep us just under what we need to really be free. This whole capitalist system and the offshoots of that, I call it commodification.
Mm-hmm.
When art is commodified, turned into a commodity, it loses its identity, I should say, and it loses its whole purpose. It becomes, well, I use the term trinket to describe it. It loses its importance. It's not even considered art anymore. It's something. It's a product that's put on the shelf, and it becomes a commodity, And as a commodity, it has to compete with other rest of the commodities on the shelf. I'm talking about other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, when you have to approach it like that, well, its importance is diminished, if not eliminated. It ceases to become. I look at it like this, Jake. We have, music. Music stimulates emotions. It sort of speaks to the emotions, and we have that side of it. We have an intellectual side of it, and then we also have the physical effect that music has. I hope I'm making this clear. The physical effect that music has on the human body, on the human spirit, is it stimulates them to dance, okay, and that has sort of overpowered, in terms of importance, in terms of recognition, in terms of awareness. The physical aspect of the physical effect of music is more prominent than I'd say the mental or intellectual. Let me put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Intellectual. Okay.
Sure.
And that intellectual element is pretty much lost on the general public. The physical element is what's the attraction. The young people in particular, they need to respond in a physical way. For instance, just take when you are exposed to music, jazz music in particular, how many people actually listen to it? Of course, the rhythm of it does actually stimulate you to pat your foot or snap your finger or move your body into sway or dance. Those are the physical reactions to jazz music. And that seems to be the prominent reaction, and that's the attraction. Okay, and you can sell that. Especially to the younger generation, they like to move. They got the energy. They have to. They have to. Move to respond to the music in a physical way, to expel some of that energy that they naturally have and respond like in that similar way. Whereas the intellectual part of the effect that the music has on the minds, on the when you listen to something, you get a message. It's deep. It goes deeper than inspiring you to move, inspiring you to snap your finger.
It makes your brain boil. It makes you burn so hard. But I don't know. I mean, my whole trip that I've been on for 6 years, I'm infected with this virus that involves intellectual burn. It's about an intellectual burn, man. That's what I'm getting at. That's why I can't get off on a digital drum machine. I can't get off on all this stuff that. I mean, you look at younger cats and they're. I mean, they don't even recognize what space in the music. You were talking so brilliantly about measuring the spaces in the music, and I don't think cats can even hear that anymore. In the sense that, you know, younger peeps who want to make the body dance, they want to dance, you know, but they
want to dance,
But I mean, the intellectualism, the thing that you're talking about, we called it a token. You called it jazz becomes commodified or almost some kind of boutique thing, you know, where it's like you go and pay $50 so you can sit there and observe some people demonstrating great facility on an instrument, when in fact it really is more about discovering your own soul or letting the music hit your soul. You know what I'm trying to say? I mean, I think that's what you're getting.
Yes, I know what you're saying, and that's very, very close to what I'm talking about. I was in Japan, and one of the things that struck me when I was over there that they have actually listening rooms where it's connected to a cafe, but there's a separate room that you can go into, and you can actually choose the music that you want to listen to. And it's quiet in there. There are other people also in the room, but no one's talking. It's just for listening. And I think that's such a wonderful thing to have, and I really wish that there was some kind of similar movement here in America that provided that space where people can go in and sit down and relax and not be disturbed and just listen. You can choose what you want to listen to, but you just go in there, and that's the whole purpose of it. And I think that's one of the problems, the reason why more people are not listening to jazz music. You know, they can move to it. You know, if it's got the right beat, they can move to it. But the rest of them get a little bored because they're I think the term laziness, mental laziness. They just don't want to do the work, the mental work, to sit down and listen deeply to music. And if you have the knowledge, you can analyze it. You can actually identify the sounds that you're listening to, the harmony. You can learn the melodies. You know, even with the how can I put this? In bebop, that particular phase that the jazz went through in the 40s, 1940s, people were required to listen. The music was so complex that, of course, some people did not want to do the work.
Right.
Didn't want to think that hard about it. Didn't want to analyze what they were listening to. But we all have that ability. You know, we can pick up the melody. We can repeat the melody that we hear, and it's the same thing when you're listening. If you listen hard enough, often enough, you will memorize the melodies, and you will maybe not be able to technically name the harmonic progressions or the pitches that you're listening to, if you're not really trained to do that. But still, you have a natural connection to those sounds, and music does stimulate the emotions. Even if you don't have an intellectual connection to it, you have an emotional connection to it, and you can listen to that and be stimulated just emotionally if you have that if you're exposed in that manner. I'm sort of stuttering. I hope I'm not.
Oh, you're doing no. You don't need to worry about anything. This is from. It's funny you bring up. This is from Mtume, the percussionist. He said.
Yeah, Mtume. Yeah.
Jimmy Heath's son. Yeah, exactly. He said. Yeah. He said we have become sonically lazy. The only cat who ever broke out of the box was Sun Ra. The rest of us, I don't care what avenue we take, we're still in that box. I mean, can you talk about? Also, here's where the rubber meets the road, Julian. I mean, I just think that. I mean, none of you guys went to Juilliard did not have a jazz program when you came to New York.
No.
There were no jazz
Yeah.
schools because once you get into school, it becomes this sort of formulaic way of playing a completely personalized kind of music. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work. I don't care how good the teachers
Yeah.
are. So I mean,
Yeah.
we obviously have become sonically lazy, but how can you look at the future of melodic improvisation, otherwise known as jazz, and say that it has a real future when there are no you just can't get bandstand, there's no touring circuit, you can't get experience on the bandstand. And I'm talking about this country because obviously jazz is now a world music, but I just don't
Right.
I don't see in the assembly line way of academia how, I mean, that's the other part of it is, this is the better question because I don't know how you're supposed to answer that question. The question is, Julian, why did all of you cats want to have your own individual sound? I think part of the problem with melodic improvisation today is that if you listen to more modern jazz, nobody really knows who's playing because you can't tell who they are. Back in the day,
Yeah.
it didn't matter if it was drummers, bone players, saxophonists. You can tell
Yeah.
right away who it was. All right,
Yes,
so
right.
so I mean,
That's
in
right.
fact, there were drummers from the Bay Area like David Garibaldi from Tower of Power. If somebody came up to him and said, "Well, you sound just like," he'd want to slit his wrists. So where
Yeah,
where,
yeah.
where did that individuality come from? I mean, can you talk about on your own trip where that came from? Because to me, that's really one of the
Yes.
biggest blessings that you guys have to offer is the fact that you all have your own individual sound.
Right, right. And that sort of came as a result of, when the oh boy, I'm trying to put this in perspective here. It came out of the frustration that artists. Well, let me be more clear. That sidemen were undergoing during the swing era in the big bands. The bands were so big that there was the opportunity to create was limited. I mean, if you did have a solo, it was a short solo, and it wasn't enough to really satisfy your urge to create, and we as creative artists needed to find a way to bring attention to the work that we were doing, the art that we were creating.
Right.
And the way to do that is to have your own voice, to develop your own voice that's recognizable. Then you could market that voice. I mean, when I use the term market, I use it hesitantly because I feel that has become a problem in the creative process. It's so separate from the creative process, and it interferes with the quality of that product. The quality of the art that's produced. And we became aware that if we really wanted to be accepted, if we really wanted to be recognized, we had to have something, a unique voice that people could learn. When they hear it, they can recognize it, and that gives it more value. Like, take for instance the problem that Sonny Stitt had when he was playing the alto saxophone.
Right.
He was sounding so much like Charlie Parker
Exactly.
that he was ignored. He was ignored. As brilliant as he was ignored because he didn't have his own voice. So he changed to the tenor saxophone and accomplished what he really wanted to accomplish. He became unique on the tenor saxophone. He didn't sound like anybody else but himself. And another example is Sonny Rollins. He sounds like only like himself, although he was perhaps inspired by Lucky Thompson or there's a couple of other people that Coleman Hawkins.
Sure.
Yes.
But I mean, sounding.
And
I mean, so when you say marketing, was it more at that time when you were really striving for your own individual sound? Was it more to the point to, because I mean, cats like Miles, or they'd come to clubs and listen to you play. People would want to hear you play.
right.
So like when you're talking about marketing yourself, you were actually trying to stand out so you could find gigs, right? I mean, connect with other peeps.
Well, yeah, but recognition
Right.
is the main thing. If you want to be special, if you want to be recognized, then so that you can attract people to come to the club to hear you play just by knowing that you're in town and you're going to be there on a specific night, and if you have a unique enough voice, a strong enough voice, they will do what's necessary to come out and hear you. And that is one of the reasons why it's critical. It's incumbent upon all artists to be unique if you want to attract attention to your work. And that's the prime reason why we develop our own sound. We develop our own ideas, although we're inspired by, like in my case, and in a lot of younger artists are concerned. We're inspired by the traditional artists, the Coleman Hawkins and the Dusty Youngs, and all from that particular generation. The next generation were inspired by them. I was inspired by J.J. Johnson, but was also aware that if I wanted to be recognized as Julian Priester, I had to have Julian Priester's voice. It had to be unique. It couldn't be like J.J. Johnson. I couldn't follow the J.J. Johnsons like other trombone players did. And I can't really criticize them other than it diminishes their ability to draw attention to themselves. I remember as a young trombone player, some of the jazz fans would refer to me as young JJ, little JJ,
Little JJ.
Little JJ, yeah, just because I played the trombone,
Right.
And I just, that's unfair. I mean, they probably meant it as a compliment, but it's still unfair because I don't want to be little JJ. I want to be Big Julian.
I dig, man.
Yeah.
I mean, but
yeah.
boy, that is so fascinating. I mean, you have played with. I mean, how did you in the '60s in New York? I mean, we talked about this last time, where you went to New York and your mode of survival was predicated on what you learned from Sun Ra. But when you got into New York, when you're talking about like the producers, people on like Orrin Keep News, I'm trying to think about the cats who truly understood, like where they said, well, I don't really necessarily care if this album only maybe at this point sells 20 copies. This is what my label stands for. This music is what my label stands for. And I'm trying to get this idea where, you were able to become a bona fide leader. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it 1960? You were a leader?
1960. Yeah, I recorded 2 albums under my own name, and that was really the inspiration of Orrin Keep News at Riverside Records, who I was introduced to by Johnny Griffin, who was already on that particular label. And it was just a result of my friendship with Johnny and the respect that he had from hearing me play. And actually, we played together in Chicago, jam sessions, basically. And I'd just like to say a word about that particular way of learning the craft.
Yeah, go ahead.
Of jazz.
Yeah, please.
Jam sessions were the training grounds. You know, when you go to the jam sessions in the early and mid 1950s, it was very competitive. Uh, Everybody wanted to. Well, the term "cut" it's a term that was used to when you were at a jam session. You want to make the biggest impression, and they were so competitive. They would play little tricks on each other to embarrass the other players on the stage, especially if they played the same instrument as you did.
What kind of tricks? Can you give an example of one of the tricks?
Well, yeah, it's a trick like calling a tune, like for instance the tune's Cherokee.
Mm-hmm.
Cherokee is played at a fast tempo most of the time, and so they would call that tune that particular tune Cherokee, and the tempo would be so fast that it was I was going to say chore, but it's more than just a chore. It was almost impossible for some of the less experienced players to live up to that. And also, they would do dirty tricks. They would each one of those standard songs had a home key that the song was played in. You know, and Cherokee was the standard key for Cherokee was key of B flat.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're up on the stage, and somebody would suggest, okay, let's play Cherokee, and they would count it off, but the rhythm section would be they would play the song in a different key, maybe a half step away from instead of playing it in B flat, they played it in B natural. And not tell the other players that it's in B natural. And we wouldn't find out until we played our first note, and it was too late then. You know,
wow.
The song had already started. I was in front of the microphone, getting ready to start my solo, and I played my first note to realize that, we're in a different key.
Well, how did you? That's the other part. When I interviewed Odine Pope, he talked about with Train, they would practice playing every song in every key. So you learn in every key, and that unlocked your ears sonically. And
yes,
I mean, so wait, just going back, Johnny Griffin. You're saying you had a chance to play with Johnny on these jam sessions, and he was an elder statesman. Is that right?
Yeah, Johnny had. Graduated from the same high school that I graduated from. He was older than I, and he graduated from high school and went right away into the professional ranks. I think that Lionel Hampton's orchestra was the orchestra that he joined and built a reputation. And then, of course, after that, after he had the reputation, he could function as a band leader. He could function as one of the premier saxophone players, and so he was working with Thelonious Monk when I arrived in New York, and I went down to the 5-spot where Monk was working, and listened to them. After the performance, Johnny invited us to his apartment, which I went, and Mark was there, and Johnny cooked breakfast for all of us, and then the next day he took me down to Riverside Records and introduced me to Orrin Keep News, and Orrin Keep News gave me a job in the shipping department so that I could have some income. And I got an apartment. I was able to get an apartment as a result of that, and get established in New York. So that was really a remarkable.
What a beautiful story! That is the most beautiful story. I mean, that is just such an incredible story that speaks to just the lineage and the brotherhood and I don't know. I mean, what was the hardest thing that you dealt with? I mean, you were very young to be a leader. What was the biggest learning experience as a leader that you had when you made those albums on Riverside?
Well, Julian Keepers was really responsible. He really worked a miracle. My first album, Julian Keepers got premier players to accompany me. I had in my band Jimmy Heath, who had just been released from prison, and on that particular album, he had to get a 24-hour leave out of Philadelphia to come to New York to meet the recording. And so he wrote a song called 24-Hour Leave, and it appears on that Keep Swinging album of mine. And the rhythm section. Okay, here's the rhythm section of the Keep Swinging album. Tommy Flanagan on piano, Sam Jones on bass, Elvin Jones on drums.
Wow. I mean, that's so basically what you're getting at is that you had all these elder statesmen that helped you swing through that whole album.
Yes, and just by being in the presence of those people, elevated my stature in the eyes and minds of jazz fans. You know, here's this young kid playing with Elvin Jones and Tommy Flanagan and Sam Jones, who were already established artists. So automatically, I was put in the same category. I was looked upon as being qualified, and it did wonders for introducing me to the jazz world in New York City. This young newcomer. Was that? I was in 1958. I was in 1960. I was 30. I was 30 years old.
Super young. I mean, you just were coming out. You're coming out of the University of Sun Ra, you know, and you were coming right into New York.
Yeah.
Did you?
Right.
Can you, for a moment, you played on African brass with Train.
Yes.
But obviously, you had a chance to play with Elvin. Elvin. I mean, setting aside just being a cosmic individual, and can you talk about his legacy to the trap set, especially as it relates to? I'd like to get your concept and how Elvin pushed this concept of the idea that any note can be the one, meaning that you can just drop the bar lines, and just keep going in this burning pattern of music. And
yes.
Obviously you need to have a gifted rhythmist, because if you don't, see, that was what blew me away the other day, was because you talked about basically not relying on the drummer for rhythm as a horn player.
Right.
But yet Elvin
Yes.
introduced this sort of, if you're not really good, it's going to be a mess. But so can you just talk about your concept of any note can be the one, and then ultimately Elvin's significance to the concept of just that spiritual music that was so misinterpreted by white America of that early 60s time?
Yeah. Well, how can I describe this in a way where your
meaningful, yeah.
Yeah. That, I think I alluded to it in our first interview there. We have to be self-sufficient as far as rhythm is concerned. We cannot rely on the drum to dictate for us the time and the rhythm, the measurement. And we have to be secure in our own ability to stay within the structure, the rhythmic structure. We have these multiples of two, basically, every 4 bars. That's the way we separate that. And if we can feel every 4 bars, then we can feel every 8 bars, and then we can feel every 16 bars. It becomes so natural that we don't have to really count. We just feel the space.
Mm.
So once you're secure in your ability to feel the space, you don't need the drums to keep time for you. But you also have to be very connected. You have to be very connected to that space that you're feeling, because drummers like Elvin, and there are a few others that play. They play within the time, but they're sort of floating with the time. They're not actually marking the time for you. They're playing within the time, but it's like sailing over the time, playing a musical and rhythmical, of course, a musical and rhythmical way, in such a way that it floats. It floats. Nobody's marking. Nobody's telling you, dictating exactly where the downbeats are. You know, because that puts weight on the time feel. If the downbeats every downbeat is dictated, then it's such a heavy weight on the time feel that there's no excitement there. You know, and if you're floating over the time, everybody's independently keeping time, they're feeling the time. Then that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. It takes development. I mean, you know, because when you're first learning, you're dependent. It's like going from childhood to adulthood.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. It's like you're in a time 10 years. You moved ahead to adulthood right away.
Yeah.
I mean, was Billy Hart that kind of drummer too?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was.
Because when I play my electronic drum kit, I don't plug it in, but I have I play this 20-minute tune, Sleeping Giant. Okay, and okay, and I wind up actually just keeping time with like Victor Pantoja and the percussion. I can't even float the way you guys were floating in M1D in M1D. I mean, to me, Billy is just. I mean, how responsible? When did you? Were you how? I know Mtume gave all of you guys your Swahili names, right?
Yeah, actually.
How'd you get yours? Is Pepe Moto?
Okay, yeah, Pepe Mtoto.
Yeah.
That was given to me. Actually, the idea was given to me when I joined, after I joined Herbie's group. The other players in the band are like Buster and Benny Maupin, and Herbie. They had been connecting with Mtume, and they had their names. So I was one of the newer. When I joined the band, I was one of the newest members. So actually the band gave me my name.
Did the band gave me? So what is that? Please tell me what that means in Swahili, because I love this. You didn't get it from Mtume.
Okay. Yeah, no, I didn't get that from Mtume. Here's the way that came about. We were in Vancouver, BC, in a hotel, and each one of us had it was like a little apartment. We had, kitchens. And so one day I decided to fix breakfast for the band. Okay, and I did. I cooked breakfast, and everybody in the band was sort of amazed, and they wanted to give me a name, a Swahili name, that translated into being the great cook.
What did you cook? Did you cook like omelets? I mean, what were you making that day?
Yeah, I think it was an omelet.
I mean, whatever. It was really tasty, and they wanted to give you a name called the cook.
Yeah,
this is so great.
Yeah, the great cook, and they translated that into Swahili, and of course I rejected it because I didn't consider myself a great cook. I could do a few things with the skillet and
skillet.
stove.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, I selected the name Spirit Child. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then they translated that into Swahili, and it came out to be Pepo and Toto. So I adopted that name, and my close friends and family who I knew during that particular period still use that name when they greet me. So it sort of stuck, and I still, use the name, the translation of that in English, Spirit Child. I use that in different situations. But my wife calls me Pepo. Buster and all the guys in the band, my ex-bandmates, all call me Pepo. And a few of my very close friends who I've known since then, since the Herbie Hancock days, use that name Pepo when they address me. But other than that, I'm still Julian Priester.
I love. This is so. I mean, because I find it to be. I mean, I just did my third interview with Mtume last weekend before I actually connected with you, and I asked him. I said, to me, it's a little bit baffling because I was playing him this clip from his uncle Tootie, and basically saying, the idea that Herbie and Buster both turned towards Buddhism and actually dropped their Swahili name. And I asked him about, I said, it seems to me like they abandoned, to a degree, despite the fact that they are just prolific musicians, that they kind of abandoned their cultural heritage. And this is what Mtume said to me. He said, because I asked him, I said, why'd they drop their names? Why did, because quote unquote. So he said, my parents, this is Mtume, Jimmy, he's like, my parents' era was the era of civil rights. Their generation represented civil disruption. The mid to late 60s was the Black Power movement, which was a generation of disruption. Everyone had different ways of approaching what they wanted to do. Herbie and Buster were great jazz musicians, black culture at its essence. So I can't say they stepped away from it, but they didn't use the Swahili names after a while. When they were using their Swahili names, they used to carry a poster of the 7 principles of the US organization: unity, self-determination, collective working responsibility, political organization, creativity, faith, and ethos, which means, which is the emphasis of your culture. It was ethos.
Right.
And then he talks about, but going back, I've interviewed now everybody except Herbie in that band, and I haven't talked to Benny Maupin either, but how much of it, the idea of, I remember talking to Eddie Henderson, and he said that you guys were there was so much telepathy and so much simpatico and so much, when you were really locked in, you guys were all reading the same texts, and you were all, it was like this serious communal brotherhood. And I just kind of wanted I didn't realize that you came in after the band had been formed. I mean, what was that experience like for you?
Well, it was, how can I describe this? Now, I came in, I wasn't actually the last one to join the band. Eddie came in after me. I can say we kind of came in around the same time, basically. But we came together in a way that was sort of surprising. If you remember, I mentioned previously that when I left Duke Ellington's band, I went to New York and formed a group of my own. And I was rehearsing that group when Garnett Brown called and asked me to substitute for him in Herbie's band. He had an assignment, a composing assignment that he needed to do. And
wow.
I was supposed to be with the group for 3 weeks, but Garnett never came back. So not that I was complaining or anything, because I found that this particular group, Herbie's group, and the individuals performing in that group, we're all of the same mind artistically. We were all on the same page artistically, and it was a surprise. It was remarkable, and those ceremonies that we underwent, getting the changing our names, getting the Swahili, not changing our names, but getting the Swahili, adopting the Swahili names, it brought us close together as a family. And with that closeness, we were able to react on this bandstand musically and as one, as one mind. Let me put it like that. We were really pretty much connected in such a way that we responded in a similar way to the music that we were creating, and I think that's what Eddie and all the Buster and everyone recognized and were amazed by, that these individuals could react as one.
Yeah, right.
In other words,
right.
The individuality coalesced into one very strong and powerful force. And we expressed it musically, but we were thinking as one on the bandstand.
Is that okay? So when you said if you could put it into like a one or two sentence phrase, and you probably just did it there, but you said you were all on the same page musically, and what page was that?
Yes.
Could you explain what that page was exactly? Was it just on it being able to be one together? What was the page that you were all on?
Well, okay. I can only tell you I can only describe the results of that. All right. We're in the midst of creating creating music on the bandstand, and we're all individuals physically, but the ideas that we would come up with in our inspiration would be so similar, and it was amazing that I would have an idea and I would play that idea, and Eddie would have a similar idea, and we would come together in spontaneously in such a way that sounded like it was premeditated. It sounded like it was composed.
Exactly. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. That's magic right there.
Yeah. So I think that's what the reference was, that we amazed ourselves how similar we, in terms of our creativity, how similar our ideas were, and all this is spontaneous now. We at the same moment we would come up with the same idea. Individually, we still, and our musical output would be as if we were playing written. All the stuff had been written out prior to our playing, and it was so organized and it was so together that it amazed even us. After the performance, we would just not be scratching our heads. We would just have this awesome, reaction.
What an amazing. I mean, how do you possibly talk to younger students today where you can say, listen, I know, I lived it, I did it, that you can play completely spontaneously and make it sound like it's completely scripted. Believe me, you can do that. I mean, how do you embolden that? That is the most emboldening thing. Do you ever remember a time where you guys did fall apart and really have to but you realized that when you did fall apart that everybody was honest enough to and loved each other enough to say, well, let's just keep moving forward here. It's just, we just fell apart one night. I mean, to me, it's like it sounds I don't know. I mean, by the time you went in and cut that Crossings album, I mean, Sleeping Giant. That tune was. You're telling me that was totally spontaneous. I mean, I know that cats like Butch Trucks from the Allman Brothers, rest in peace. I mean, that was an inspiring album to drummers like him. But I'm just trying to like, at that point when you went into the studio, you guys have been working this stuff out on the bandstand for a while, so it was kind of second nature, or where were you at that point? Because the album it just sounds, it's on the razor's edge, the whole album.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I would say, we worked it out on the bandstand, but no, that's not really accurate, because every night would be different.
Right.
And so when we went into the studio, that version of it was different from previous versions. It's not like we had planned ahead what we were going to do. No, that wasn't the way it happened at all, and that's what made it so special. That every time we perform, even though we were performing the same piece, it was different. It had a different character. It had a different sound. It had a different inspiration there. We were inspired by the moment. I think that's the most accurate way I can put it.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you, because I'm fascinated by this, because the Fat Albert Rotunda Band was like Johnny Coles, Joe Henderson, Tootie Heath, Garnett Brown, Herbie, and then Pete LaRocca was actually playing drums, but he just stopped showing up for the gigs. He couldn't get there on time. And so Buster came in. And when you joined the band, though, I mean, when did the idea of playing the shakuhachi flutes and the percussion for 20 minutes before you would even, that wasn't in the Fat Albert Rotunda bag, right? I mean, how did that sort of ceremony or that christening of the show come about? How was that conceived?
Well, that came out of an effort on our parts to bring in the spirit of Africa, African percussion.
Sure.
And that's probably the most accurate way I can describe how that happened. It was the spirit of African percussion, but it had the rawness of African American, the African American experience. The excitement of the African American experience, and also the sorrows of the African American experience, and equipped with that, not knowledge, but with that experience as a how can I put it, a place to draw from. I think that really contributed us being on the same page, because we all came from, had the same inspiration. We all had the same ideas, the same body, the same pain, the same joy, and so armed with all of that experience, similar experience, we were able to express it in the music that we were performing, that we were creating, and the camaraderie that was present amongst the members of that band was how can I put it, the glue that held it all together. And it was amazing. It was amazing. Even at the London House in Chicago, which is a restaurant, an upscale restaurant where the businessmen would come in with their clients and they would discuss business. And the music that we were playing was so distracting that...
No, I know. I just transcribed. Buster said that the owner came up to you and said, "Listen, I love the music, but why don't we push it back, the start time back to 8 p.m. because at 6 p.m. the cats are still eating their dinner. They can't digest,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
before that 3 weeks were over, we had captured the permission of the customers. Of course, they had come there to eat, but the music was so powerful that they get the fork halfway up to their face and freeze because the music grabbed their attention. And so that's one of the reasons why the owner suggested that we start later. But ultimately, he wanted us to actually. He had another venue. There was a theater there, and he suggested that we move performance out of the restaurant, the London House, and move it over to this theater, where there was no distractions about food wasn't being served, drinks weren't being served, and the audience could just concentrate on listening to the music. But for some reason, that idea was rejected, and
the auditorium. It was the Auditorium Theater in Chicago or something like that. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I can't think of the name of the theater, but it was an alternative to the place that we were to the London House, and. Well, we were quite relieved when we realized that even the waitresses were going around from table to table asking the patrons to bring their conversations down so they can listen so they can hear the music.
Wow.
And
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
wow.
Yeah,
that's. I mean, you had some profound impact on the Cats, the Bay Area bands like Tower of Power, and I think you had a huge impact on bands like the Grateful Dead. These guys were able to come see you and watch these performances, and it was, they couldn't necessarily demonstrate the facility or the technique of it, but it was this presence and this power and this complete spontaneity and this ability to start, once you connect with that more and more, the ability to read the minds of the other guys on stage and know what's coming. That was the magic for these guys. Had never seen anything, not to mention it was pulled off so incredibly, it wasn't sloppy, it was like really tight, really burning music.
Yes, it was.
But,
I just give me the comment that when that band, when the pressures got the economic pressures got too much for Herbie to sustain, and he had to take a different direction in order to recover financially, because he spent a lot of money with the expenses of just working that sextet. So when he formed the Headhunters, it was a smaller size group, and the overhead was less, so he could keep a few of the dollars that he made. He was making money, but the expenses were so great doing the NYDC band that he wasn't able to take all of that money home. And so it made good business sense.
Well, I think also there was Eddie told me that there was this Crossroads show at the Troubadour with the Pointer Sisters, where it was very apparent to Herbie. It just slapped him, like, because David Rubinson had both you guys under. And it was like both the Pointer Sisters are playing this, like, toe tap. People were dancing to that music, and they were being commercially successful. I mean, as I love the Headhunters because it's not fluff. It's great, and I love the cats that played in the band. But it fit into the the musical style known at that time was just becoming known as funk music. It was funk,
Right.
you know. So all of a sudden it
Right.
became more commercially appealable. So Headhunters, that was one of the most people say that's one of the highest selling jazz albums of all time, but
Yes.
it wasn't the jazz that M1DC was playing. M1DC was more like, you know, please be quiet so we can channel our inner space and spirituality listening to this music. That's jazz.
Yes.
So, you know, and I understand
Yes.
all the way around. I dig it. I mean, I vetted this. I just want to, before we wrap up set 2, and again, we're just beginning to cook here with Julian Priester, having a ball as we go through his career. But could you talk to the peeps around the world about when Rahsaan, Max, Mingus, you talk about just getting enough breadcrumbs to survive, to keep you coming back.
Yes.
The volunteer slavery component. What were the things that stick with you that those cats like Max would say to you that you can talk to people today who are seeing things play out in a different fashion, whether it's Philandro Castillo, now that we even have film and footage of things, film and footage don't matter anymore. Justice is not served. What is the inspirational stuff that you hang on to from Max and those cats that you can infuse to younger people who are feeling very despondent, stressed out, or delusioned at the current state of affairs in this country?
Yeah. Oh boy. Well.
And if you can say that's too broad. I can't handle it right now. You can totally go there if you want to.
No. I do have thoughts about that,
go ahead.
the condition of and the way art is commodified here, and I try to make my students aware that commodification is here to stay. You know, I mean, it's a product of capitalism. You know, you have to have commodity to fail, and as soon as you commodify your art, you diminish its impact on the listener.
Mm-hmm.
In music,
I dig.
in jazz in particular.
Yeah.
Okay, the identity becomes clouded. You know, it's not, the value is diminished. The value of the art and the recognition of it as being an art is diminished. You know, I use the term trinket.
That was the word. It was trinket. Trinket. You said trinket.
Yeah,
that's what it was. Yeah, it's a boutique thing. It's boutique stuff.
Yes. And so I try to make the young people aware of this condition. It does exist. It cannot be ignored, but it can be changed. We can change it. The actual musicians, and I've dropped the use of that particular term too. It's a valid term when you're learning. If you are a person with an instrument, a musical instrument, and you're for hire. You know, I have a horn and I'm for hire. Then I advertise this, and people will call me up and hire me for various functions. But there's nothing really creative there. I can sneak a creative idea in there once in a while, but most often I'm providing a service. You know, if it's got to be funk, okay, I'll play it as in that particular style.
Mm-hmm.
If it's Dixieland, I'll play it in that particular style. If it's more classical, I'll play in that particular style. So I'm a musician. Those are musicians. But once you adopt a attitude, position where you're going to be creative, you're going to just play spontaneous creation, improvised music, then the concept of art, being an artist, to do this, comes into play. And once you change your identity from musician to artist, you're on a higher plane. You're on a higher plane, and you can you should be compensated according to the plane that you're on. As a musician, like I said, you're a laborer. You have a horn, you have an instrument, and you put yourself with this particular instrument up for hire, and you're hired to perform something that's not of your creation but somebody else's creation. And as a musician, that's legitimate. But as an artist, you want to be the creator. Okay, and that's what separates.
I know you're. So you're when you say you're a laborer, meaning you're just a craftsman at that point, right? You're going
a craftsman.
That's
yes.
what you're craftsman.
Yes.
So go ahead, continue on. You're good.
Yes. So I try to make students aware. There's nothing really wrong with being a musician. There's nothing really wrong with being a musician with an instrument, and you put yourself up for hire, and you will serve your employer. You're making a living,
right?
And that's not to be criticized. You have to, even as an artist, you have to feed yourself. You have to pay for a roof over your head, and everything is going to cost something monetarily. Whether you pay it on the spot or you have to pay it later, or duck out on it. Which a lot of us are forced to do. But it's still, the process is still the same. If you are for hire, and then you have earned the title musician, and there's no, you're not really diminishing your importance, because that's an important role to play. But if you choose to be an artist, then not a lot of people are going to hire you to play their music, because you're going to play it in your particular style, and it's not necessarily what they want, the style that they want, the style that they have planned to have their particular music played in. And like I've mentioned before, it's a legitimate path to take. But
this is so important. How can you pivot? How can you change the paradigm and still be a true artist?
Well, no, you're either one or the other.
Really?
If you're gonna hire yourself, well, no. Let me say
go ahead. Yeah.
No. You can, if the situation calls for it, if your rent is due, and the only way you can get the funds to pay your rent, you're gonna have to hire yourself out. Because as an artist, you can make art, but you don't actually expect to be, to be immediately compensated for making art. It's as an artist, you decide to take that path, and you're on that path. You can't demand to be paid for it. You can create an atmosphere where people will pay you. They appreciate what you're doing so much that they will voluntarily pay you. But you cannot get away from the need to bring your musician skills into the fore, because of what I just said. The rise and fall of the fork is something you can't ignore. And having a roof over your head and some water to drink and clean cleanse yourself and your clothes and whatever else. Everything costs money. Everything. When you open your eyes in the morning, when you wake up, that's going to cost you. When you go to the bathroom and flush the toilet, that's going to cost you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't get away from that.
No.
And so you have to provide for that, but you don't necessarily have to. You don't have to use your art as the instrument to earn money. You don't necessarily have to use your art as an instrument to earn money. You can teach. You can earn money as a teacher. You can do lectures and workshops and other things as a source of income. And there are alternatives. That's what I'm trying to do. There are alternatives. You just have to be prepared and knowledgeable about what you're doing, so that you do have something to present and get paid for it outside of your artistic pursuits. So there are alternatives that you can bring into play to satisfy your need to support yourself, physically and other whatever's necessary. You got to put clothes on your back. You got to put food in your stomach. You got to have a roof over your head, and there's no way around that. And you have to just create the atmosphere that those things will be taken care of.
Is that part of the new paradigm, or was that something that, like, Pete LaRocca became a lawyer and Johnny Griffin moved to Europe, as so many guys did? Maybe because of the racism, but also maybe because they didn't want to do what you're saying. They wanted to be an artist and wanted to be respected and paid for their art, and that's what they went to Europe. Has it always? Right. Is that what Max would have been saying too? Is that you have to do other things, or? I guess I think that you're making a very. If you were talking to a class full of millennials right now, that's a really, really good lecture to give. You're very articulate, very well spoken, and it makes sense. But I'm not sure if your forefathers would have done that.
Well, I don't know. Because the whole music world has evolved.
Right.
And when back during the swing era, there was mostly, although there was Coleman Hawkins and Lester Young and there's a bulk of people. I'm sure you're already familiar with the names. I don't have to name it, but listeners, if they just do some research, they will also find out the reality of the music world as it was back in the 1920s and the 1930s and the 1940s. And each one of those decades were different as far as the music world is concerned. The music evolved. In the 1920s, there was well, I don't know if I call it folk music, but I'm thinking about Dixieland. I'm thinking about the swing era, the big band era in the 1930s, and the modern era of the 1940s. And each one of those, the music took on a certain a different persona. It had a different edge on it. It had a different sound, a different quality about it, and that continued. That evolution continued. In the 50s, it changed again. In the 60s, it changed again. It kept developing. It kept getting a new character, and after the advent of spontaneous composition. And this is another thing that's just happening in terms of identifying the styles of music. I heard something that just came out of the mouth of, actually I read it, I didn't hear it, I read it in an article of this gentleman on one of the colleges who just took over the jazz program in one of the colleges on the East Coast. And he had introduced a new concept. He's actually taken a path that dealt with what we term as free music.
Right.
Free jazz. And he described it. He gave it a title. And the title he gave it was something that really upset me. He called it noise music. noise music. The terms are opposite. You know, how could it be noise and music?
Right, right.
And it upset me that this person in academia, in a position to impart his knowledge to students, to have that concept of combining noise and music and treat it like it's a legitimate art form. It may be. It's just way outside of my ability to understand.
Yeah, no, they're paradoxical. You can't put those two together.
Yeah.
There's no way. Noise is,
Noise is noise.
There's no music is not noise. So I mean, it's
They're-
not. If you're making music, you're not making noise.
Right.
I don't think that. Yeah, I dig.
That's the distinction. The separateness of them. One is one, and the other is the other.
So he was just basically giving a disparaging title to music for no reason.
Yeah. I guess he's trying to make sense of free music. Some of it does sound, it's different to make sense of.
Well, I mean, I don't want to when I talked to Ramsey Lewis, he just said that a lot of the Art Blakey would say, my job is to wash away the dust of everyday life for blue collar cats and cats that we're just trying to get through the day. And so some of the music, it did become abstract to the point where people really, like we talked about in the first, they like with the 4/4 time, they knew where the upbeats and the downbeats were, so they were able to dance to it. But the people start, if they went into a standard tune, you kind of lost the people once you played the head and then you went off into the solo. It got they just lost it, So in some ways, jazz became a little bit like an inside joke for musicians. It became a little too wonkish, and so you came up in the blues-based spiritual music of Chicago, and your generation understands the significance of the blues to jazz.
Yes.
But once it becomes a boutique or a trinket kind of music, and you're paying a certain amount of money to go see a show, the audience, all of a sudden, the mentality of I don't know. I mean, to me, M1Dishi, what it stood for also was we really dig the music we're playing, and you, the audience, we hope you, the audience, digs it too. But even if you don't, we're still going to play what we like because we know it's really deep.
Yeah.
And once you start going back to commodifying, all of a sudden the expectation is the audience expects certain things, therefore you have to placate to them. That's not art.
Right.
All right?
That's not art. Right.
No?
Yes.
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 I mean, so, listen, we did another hour and 20, Julian. I just had a ball again. I'll call you next week. We can set up a time to do set 3.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
And by the way, the first interview I sent to you in your messenger in Facebook, I'm not sure if you got it or not. I sent you a link to it.
Oh, yeah. I'll have to look.
I'm just saying. I want you to make sure you have these for your archives. I assume at some point they're going to come in handy. So I'll send you this one later on too. And it's always It's a treat to talk to you, man. Thank you so much for everything.
Oh, sure. My pleasure.
Later on, dude.
Okay.
Bye. Just another day at the office. Henry Bibby, Jay Messina, Julian Priester. We're going to take a couple of days off here, thankfully, and we'll be back on Saturday at the regular time. It's Women's Appreciation Week on the Jake Feinberg Show. Take care.